Barry Crimmins meant so much to stand-up comedy. He'll be missed. Hey, thanks for watching. So today I'm going to talk about Barry Crimmins. He was a stand-up comedian, and he did a lot of other things as well. He was an author. He worked for Air America, the left-wing radio network. During the early days of the internet with America Online, he testified in front of Congress to put a stop to child pornography on the internet. He's really had a big life, But today what I want to talk about is his influence on the stand-up comedy scene. Barry was a stand-up comedian, and in the 80s he founded two clubs in Boston, the Ding Ho and Stitches. And he kind of set the tone for the kind of comedy you needed to do if you wanted to get on stage. If you wanted mic time, you couldn't come with weak comedy. He was real insistent that you were real, that you had a point of view, that you had a voice, you had something to say. And if you didn't, well, you didn't get on stage. And these were just some standards that he set in his clubs. And through doing this, it really cultivated a scene in Boston that was really important to stand-up comedy. If you compare the Boston scene to other places didn't have standards like that. You could take the stage with any corny stuff, and it was okay. But that didn't fly at Barry's clubs. Those standards really brought about some really interesting and original comedians like Stephen Wright, Paula Poundstone, Kevin Meaney, Bobcat Goldthwait, who directed a movie about Barry, Call Me Lucky, which is a heartbreaking documentary. You can check it out. I'll leave a link below. But not just those comedians from the 80s. That tradition continued into the 90s and further. And so many great comedians that really had something to say. Some of my favorite comedians all came out of that same scene. Such as Louis C.K., Bill Burr, Patrice O'Neill, Nick DiPaolo. These are all great comedians. And I remember, 15 years ago, listening to the Opie and Anthony radio show, and they'd have comedians on all the time. And they would sit around and talk about what it was like getting their start in comedy. And they'd often talk about Barry Crimmins and what he meant to the Boston scene and how important he was. If you were to compare comedians from Boston versus comedians from any other city, I think Boston is at the top or near the top compared to any other city in the country. And I think a lot of that has to do with the influence that Barry Crimmins had starting that scene. Often we just see the result of something, but we don't really understand where it came from. And I really believe that so much of the better stand-up comedy today that you see was really influenced by Barry Crimmins and what he set up in the 80s and 90s in Boston. Barry had an incredible life. He passed away of cancer last week. But you can check out his comedy. Louis C.K. directed a stand-up special of his a year ago, and Bobcat directed a movie, Call Me Lucky, which is a documentary about his life and being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. It's a tough one to watch. But Barry's influence on stand-up comedy and kind of authenticity and realness in stand-up, I think is seen today. And his influence will not be forgotten, I hope. So if you don't know about Barry Crimmins, check out the movies I have in the links below. Leave a comment. Peace. You can help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers by clicking the like button and subscribing. Thanks.